Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Everything in healing starts in one place. Not mindset, not motivation, not another list of things you already know you're supposed to do. It starts in your nervous system. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is, it learned how to respond to conditions that no longer exist, and your nervous system never got the message. That's what we're here for today. If you've ever called yourself too much, too sensitive, too broken, or genuinely just couldn't figure out why you can't seem to get it together, or maybe like me, keep it together, this episode is for you. I'm Emily. Welcome to Freaked Out and Flawless. I built Freaked Out and Flawless because I live both sides of the name, and I'm still somewhere in the middle on any given Tuesday. This healing stuff is a lot of work. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a girl with complex PTSD and a hypermobile meat sack that has its own dramatic opinions about everything, and a brain that ran on pure survival mode for so long. I genuinely just thought that was me, diagnosed personality disorders and all. Spoiler alert, it wasn't me, or my personality, or some diabolically named disorder. It's a dysregulated nervous system. Turns out, there's a huge difference. Look, I've done the fucking work. I've also avoided the work. And sometimes that even happens in the same afternoon. I've had breakthroughs and I've had bedrot weeks, and sometimes those weeks turn to months. I've spent a lot of time in the pits of darkness, and I've experienced the moments where the spark came back. What I know deeply structurally from the inside out is how a trauma-wired nervous system works, why it hijacks you when you least expect it, and how to design a life around it instead of white-knuckling it into submission. Finally, it is all about the return to self, the return to being, and the renewal that follows the showing up. And I know that because I'm here today. And that's what this whole thing here is. Not a hype space, not a healing performance, not another toxic positivity brand with a pretty font. This is a practice container. Trauma-informed, low pressure, built for nonlinear humans who are done pretending they can hustle their way to wholeness. And it's also for the folks who've showed up, done the work, and need a space to keep that sacred work alive. And let me be clear, isn't a destination. It isn't an endpoint. There is no endpoint. That's not exactly how healing works. We'll get into all that over the coming weeks. But if I had to boil it down and say one thing, the old cliche of healing is a journey, it's true. And the key to unlocking yourself finally is simple. It's the practice of returning, regulated enough to live well, honest enough to repair, and stubborn enough to keep showing up anyway. Freaked out and right on time. I'm glad you're here. Let's get into it. Before we dive in, I want to give your nervous system a little heads up about what we're doing today and over the coming weeks, because trauma brains do better when they know what's coming. So no surprises, here's the map. Today is week 1 of our 12-week cycle. This week's title is Regulated and Radiant, and the whole point of this week is one thing: nervous system safety first. In this series, we're going to cover how your brain makes connections and why that matters for healing, what trauma actually does to your nervous system and why it's not a personal failure, what survival mode really is: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and why you might be living in it without even knowing it. The sneaky triggers, including the good adrenaline ones and the ones that are so wired in, they just feel like your personality. And why regulation is not optional. It's the foundation everything else is built on. By the end of today's episode, you're going to understand why nothing else works without this piece, and you're going to leave with one anchor practice to carry into your week. If you've joined the Facebook group, you also have access to the workbook that accompanies this series' Check the Files section. Remember, there is no pressure to do any of the practices or journals or anything perfectly. For one, there is no perfect, and two, that's not what we do here. We live real lives in real time with real stuff going on. So just be authentic with yourself and return. Okay, before we go into the content, we're going to do one thing first. We're actually going to take a moment and get present because you might have driven here, scrolled here, stress eaten your way here, and your body needs a minute to land. And this is not optional. I know some of you are going to want to skip this part. Please don't. This is the work right here. This is what we mean when we say nervous system safety first. So find a comfortable position. You don't have to close your eyes if that doesn't feel safe. You can soften your gaze, look slightly down, whatever works for you. We're just getting a little comfortable. And we're going to start with a simple orienting exercise. This is about telling your nervous system we are here, we are safe, and this moment is okay. So look around the room slowly. Name out loud or just in your head 5 things that you can actually see right now. Not analyzing them or not noticing them. Maybe it's a window or a coffee mug, the light, a plant, even your own hands. So take a moment and notice. Now bring attention to your body. What can you physically feel? Maybe the weight of your chair, fabric against your skin, the temperature of the air, your feet on the floor, your breath moving in and out. Take a moment here. What do you feel? Good. Now take 3 intentional breaths with me. In through your nose for 4 counts, hold gently, out through your mouth for 6. And of course, if that pace is not what works for you, find your own pace. You're simply trying to intentionally focus on your breath. Breathe in. Hold. And out. One more breath in. Hold. And out. And one more. In. Hold. And out. Perfect. Thank you for joining me in that breath. Okay. Notice where you are right now. You're here. Your body is here. Whatever's happening out there can wait for just a few minutes. That's the practice. Okay, let's go. We're going to talk about how your brain makes connections. And first, I want to start with something that's going to reframe a lot of what you think you know about yourself. Your brain is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. It's a learning machine, an incredibly efficient, pattern-obsessed, experience cataloging learning machine. And it is always, always, always trying to keep you alive and preserve whatever sense of safety it has learned. So the problem isn't that your brain is broken. The problem is that it learned how to respond to situations in conditions that no longer exists. And your brain hasn't downloaded the new security patch. Here's the neuroscience piece, and I promise I'm going to make it actually useful. There's a phrase in neuroscience coined by neuropsychologist Donald Hebb back in 1949. Neurons that fire together wire together. What that means in plain English is this. Every time you have an experience, your brain creates a connection between the things that are present during that experience and safety or danger. This can be the smell of something, a tone of voice, even a time of day, a feeling in your body. Your brain files all of it together under, this is what danger feels like, or this is what safety feels like. The more times that pattern repeats, the stronger the wire gets, and the faster the brain can activate it because your brain is optimizing for speed. It would rather react in a split second and be wrong than take its time and be dead. And that's not a flaw, that's the design. That's millions of years of evolution keeping humans alive. So here's where it gets personal, because we're not Neanderthals. When you experienced trauma, whether that was one acute event or years of chronic stress or childhood life that kept your system on high alert, your brain made connections, strong ones, efficient ones. It learned, this kind of situation is dangerous. This kind of person is a threat. This feeling in my body means something bad is about to happen. And it wired those connections deep. The thing is, your brain made those connections in the past, but it activates them now in the present. Every time something remotely similar shows up, your brain goes, I know this pattern. We've been here before. And it fires the alarm. It doesn't stop to check the calendar. It doesn't ask, is this actually the same situation or does it just smell like it? It just fires. And I want to land here for a second before we move on, because it's not your fault. If you've ever called yourself oversensitive, dramatic, too much, broken, weak, that framing is wrong. Factually wrong. What you have is a nervous system that learned to protect you. And it did a good job because you are here today, right now. And the work we are doing in this cycle, in this community, is not about fixing a broken person. It's about updating a system that learned its lessons too well in dangerous conditions that no longer exist. That is very different. That matters. Okay, now let's talk about what trauma actually does. And I need to push back on a definition most people are carrying around. Trauma is not just bad things that happened to you. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete in a way that leaves a lot of people out and removes the factual context of what is happening in your nervous system. Trauma is what happens inside your nervous system in response to an experience your system couldn't fully process at the time. It's not just the event, it's how your nervous system processes it. What that means is it doesn't have to be dramatic, and it doesn't even have to be something someone else would call traumatic. It doesn't even have to be something that you remember clearly. If your nervous system couldn't metabolize it, if it got stuck, that is trauma. Full stop. Now, your nervous system has what we call a window of tolerance, and this is a term developed by Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA. The window of tolerance is the zone where you can function, you can think, you can feel, connect, and respond, make decisions. You're regulated. When you're inside the window, you can handle stress without it taking you over. You can have hard conversations, you can sit with uncomfortable feelings, you can make decisions. Outside the window, above it, or below it, is where things fall apart. Above the window is hyperarousal. Fight, flight, panic, rage, anxiety, overwhelm. Everything feels urgent and loud and like too much. Below the window is hypoarousal. Freeze, shutdown, disassociation, numbness. Nothing feels real. You can't make yourself do anything. You're just flatlined. Trauma doesn't just narrow the window, it keeps you bouncing between these two states, exhausted, trying to regulate yourself with whatever you can reach: food, scrolling, substances, busyness, isolation, people pleasing. Here's what I want you to hear, and really hear it. Survival mode is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is not lack of discipline or motivation or willpower. Survival mode is not some character flaw. Survival mode is your nervous system doing its primary job, keeping you alive, at the expense of everything else, sure. Because in that real threat, keeping you alive is the only job that matters. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, creativity, and learning, that goes partially offline under threat. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk documents this extensively in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, one of the most important books written on trauma and the nervous system. Your brain is not going to waste resources on thinking when it needs you to run, fight, or disappear. So when people say, just focus, just try harder, just be consistent, just follow through, they're asking you to use a part of your brain that your nervous system has literally put on standby. This really means you cannot think your way out of a nervous system state. You can only regulate your way out. This is not a workaround. That's neuroscience. And that's why regulation comes first every time, with no exceptions. You've probably heard of fight or flight, first described by physiologist Walter Cannon in the 1920s. Most people think that's the whole story. It's not. There were actually 4 primary survival responses, and depending on how your nervous system was conditioned, you probably have a dominant one or a pattern of how you cycle through them. The 4 survival responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fight anger, irritability, defensiveness, a strong urge to control your environment. Sometimes this looks like rage, sometimes it looks like arguing, and sometimes it's just the low hum of being constantly pissed off and not knowing why. Flight, the urge to escape physically or mentally. Avoidance, busyness as a coping strategy. Overworking, scrolling, running from stillness because stillness feels dangerous. Freeze, shutdown, paralysis, the inability to start things, finish things, decide things. The body that just won't move off the couch because it feels like 500 pounds is sitting on top of you. The executive dysfunction that looks like laziness, but it's actually your system slamming the brakes. That's why it's so hard to take a shower. And then there's fawning. We don't talk about this one nearly as much. People pleasing, hypervigilance about other people's emotions, saying yes when every part of you wants to say no, shrinking to keep others comfortable, making yourself small to stay safe. This fourth response, fawn, was named and defined by author and therapist Pete Walker in his work on complex PTSD. Most of us have a primary response and a backup. You might go flight first, stay busy, avoid, keep moving, and then when you can't run anymore, you crash into freeze. That's kind of my pattern. None of these responses are wrong. They kept you alive. But when they become your default state, when you're living in survival mode all the time, it costs you everything else. Now, here's the piece that hits people hard. When your nervous system has been in threat response for a long time, months, years, decades, it starts to recalibrate to that as the baseline. Hypervigilance starts to feel like being smart. Shutting down starts to feel like being tired. Fawning starts to feel like being kind. Fight starts to just feel like being passionate. You stop noticing that you're dysregulated because dysregulation has become normal. And then a small trigger happens. An email, a tone of voice, a change in plans, and your system fires like you're being chased by the bear. And you wonder, why am I like this? Well, you're like this because your nervous system is doing its job based on data from conditions that no longer exist. It hasn't been updated. That's what we are doing here. Sneaky triggers. Now, triggers aren't always what you think. When most people think about triggers, they think about the obvious ones: a loud noise, a specific smell, a memory, something that clearly connects to something that happened. But a lot of triggers aren't obvious. A lot of them have been wired in so deeply for so long that they don't feel like triggers anymore. They just feel like how you are. Here's one that catches people off guard. Adrenaline is adrenaline. Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory helps explain why. Your nervous system does not distinguish between exciting adrenaline and threatening adrenaline. It all runs on the same chemical. So if you've noticed that you feel activated, like anxious, shaky, or overwhelmed right before something good happens, that's why. Excitement fires the same alarm system as danger. Launching something, going live, a first date, a big opportunity, getting good news. For a regulated nervous system, that activation is manageable. It's the fun kind of butterflies. For a dysregulated nervous system, it can spiral into a full threat response, and your body doesn't know you're excited, it just knows the alarm is going off. That's where a lot of panic attacks and symptoms like that come from. Then there are triggers that are so wired in, they've just become part of your identity. Certain tones of voice that make your body brace before your brain even registers anything. Times of day, evening maybe, or a specific season where your mood just drops and you don't know why. Being watched while you work, being asked to hurry, being in spaces that remind you of spaces where things went wrong. You've maybe told yourself, I just don't like that. That's just how I am. That's just my personality. And some of it is personality, but some of it is your nervous system saying, the last time this happened, something bad followed. Stay sharp. Learning to tell the difference, that's part of the work. And we're going to come back to this throughout these 12 weeks. Regulation is not a luxury. And I want to close out the content portion of today by being really direct about that. Regulation is not a treat you get to do when things slow down. It is not a self-care extra. It is not a nice to have. It is not something either that you earn by being productive first. Regulation is the prerequisite for every other thing this cycle is going to ask of you. You cannot do meaningful thought work from survival mode. You cannot build sustainable habits from a shutdown nervous system. You cannot grow self-worth while your brain is scanning for threats. You cannot make value-aligned decisions from a dysregulated state. And it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's not a character flaw. It's because of neuroscience. Because the brain that is responsible for running all of that is not fully available when that threat alarm is running. Here's the grace piece, because we always got to build the grace piece in. Regulation does not look the same for everyone. It's not always a bubble bath and a meditation app with a journaling routine. For your nervous system, regulation might look like movement, where you're walking or shaking, stretching, anything that gets sensation moving through your body. Maybe it's breath. Specifically, slow, extended exhales signal safety to your nervous system. Maybe you use sensory grounding, maybe splash cold water on your face, or use a weighted blanket, or find a strong smell that you associate with safety. Sound works too. There's humming, listening to music, a voice you trust, there's white noise, and yelling is also regulation. So maybe driving down the road when you're in the car, you get a chance to belt some tunes and you yell it out. And there's another one, co-regulation, which is being near another regulated person. Porges's polyvagal theory actually identifies this as a biological need, not just a nice to have. This is why community matters. We literally regulate each other. So your job this week is not to become fully regulated. Your job is to find one anchor, one thing that reliably helps your nervous system downshift, and then practice returning to it. Not every day perfectly, not on a schedule, just when you notice you're dysregulated, come back to the chosen anchor. That's the whole micro habit for this week. One anchor. That's it. All right, let's bring it home. After you choose the one daily regulation anchor, the small thing that you can come to, just one thing, breath-based, sensory, or movement-based, that is genuinely accessible for you on your worst days. Not on your aspirational day, not on your best day version of yourself. If your answer is a 2-mile run and a green smoothie, go back. What is the version of that for a 20% capacity day? Because that's the version we're actually practicing with, and that's the one that actually shows up when things are hard. Do you have a favorite coffee drink that you like to keep in the fridge, or a favorite juice, or a favorite tea? Make sure you have something, just something small, whatever it is that you've chosen for your anchor. That's it. Choose it, name it, and practice returning to it this week. Not because you failed by needing it, but because returning to it is the practice. Now I have a journal prompt for this week. One question. And again, there is no perfect answer, and you don't have to answer it all at once. The question is, what does safety feel like in my body, even at 5%? Not what does safety look like in your life? What does it feel like in your body? Where do you feel it? What does it do to your shoulders, your jaw, your breath? And I guess 2 questions, because when was the last time you noticed even a small amount of that safety? 5% is enough to start with. We are not going for full safety in week 1. We are learning to recognize the signal, and we're offering ourselves a place to rest and a place to return to, a place to land, a place to be. And before I let you go, we're going to name the grace plan, because we always name it in advance. If this week is hard, if you miss the anchor practice, if you didn't choose one, if you don't journal, or if you spiral and lose the thread entirely, here's what you do. You don't quit. You don't start over from zero. You don't add it to the list of evidence that you can't do this. You just return. You come back whenever you can. That's the whole cycle. Regulation, awareness, truth, application, repair, return. Just always come back. That's what flawless means in practice, not flawless execution. Faithful return to self. Okay, that's week 1. The live practice circle is here to show up on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You don't have to talk, you can just show up. And the Facebook group is open. Join. Drop your anchor practice in there if you want to. Grab that workbook, or just read what everybody else is doing. Either way, you showed up. That was already the whole practice. You matter. I see you. Thank you for joining me.
Free audio post-production by F.L.A.W.L.E.S.S.